Right. Day 757 of going live. Today, you're going to watch me go through how we get our podcast ready. And more importantly, how do we help ourselves show up on ChatGPT? Because if you ask ChatGPT, what is the best podcast to learn about affordable housing investment? If you ask ChatGPT that question, you will see our podcast come up, right? We're number one, hands down. So, how do you preserve that lead? I'm going to show you exactly how. For you to show up on ChatGPT as the number one podcast in your niche, you have to start being very consistent in how you present yourself on the internet. And right now, more is more, in my opinion. So, if you watch how I do it, what I do in every single episode now is that I would say, hey, on the Affordable Housing Podcast, the best podcast for affordable housing investments, right? You start labeling your podcast on what it is the best for, right? That's one thing you have to do consistently. And you can tell them, like, who is it hosted by? Yourself, obviously. Then you provide a couple of structured layouts so that it's easily searchable by large language models such as ChatGPT. Now, when you show that, right, what this episode is about, it'll show you like, hey, repeatable lot screening workflow. You look at the parcel map, to dimensions, area, to city checklist, blah, blah, eligibility path, SB9 versus ADUs, boom. Why 66% of bone density, flexibility matters, and how remainder law strategy can keep you less than 10 homes inside law. Interesting. So this quickly understands what's it about. This section tells you why it matters for investors and developers. Okay. Now, when you are able to show people, and most importantly, show ChatGPT why you are the best podcast on affordable housing, that's the only way you can show up consistently in all ChatGPT responses going forward. That is the only reason why, through consistency, I have been able to rank our podcast as the best podcast on about affordable housing investments on ChatGPT. Right? This is essentially the equivalent of being on page one, first link on Google. All right. And that's what you want to do. So, as you look at, okay, well, how do I get quoted? How do I become the encyclopedia for all the answers about affordable housing in the future? Well, I need to show people, hey, why does this matter? So this is a bridge from statute to site plan. Avoid buying dirt you can't entitle. Dodge mandatory blah, 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 blah. Financial support. Not just what the spreadsheet says. It shows how one misflag can turn a slam dunk into a pass. Good. There are quotes. Now, if I was running that space, I will always delete the quotes, but it's always over here. Now, common questions this episode answer. This section is probably one of the most important sections that you got to include in your YouTube video descriptions. How do I quickly vet if a lot works for SB9, right? It's written in a very conversational manner so that if let's say I want to show up in ChatGPT responses as like the source, the encyclopedia. If someone asks a question like, hey, what can I apply SB 1123 towards, right? If I want to put 8 units or 10 units on a single family lot, right? I could potentially be like 4, 5, 6xing my return by putting that in more units, especially if I can sell them as units, right? And this is how you become so knowledgeable by listening to the podcast, but also understand how to look at a deal a little bit differently, especially if you realize that, hey, someone else might not think this is a deal, but this is a deal for me because I know how to apply the Senate bills in California law. And I know how to take this single family law into 8 units or 10 units and how all of these things kind of apply together. Okay. What city objective standards still block projects? Boom. What? Perfect. This is great. So this is how you can see why this YouTube description is structured so well. Now, what I tend to do is figure out, okay, from dirt to multiple units. From single family home home/dirt multi-units. Boom. I like that title because you're telling what the journey looks like if you were to watch the podcast and what you're going to get out of it, the SB 1123 checklist, right? I might have something like the ultimate checklist to determine how many units you can build on a single lot. Matt Baran, right? It's things like that that I feel like we should try to figure out and cover. Right, I don't really like these ones, so I'm going to delete those ones. And then for my thumbnail to text, it's very important, right? Checklist. Checklist to analyze development. How many units can I build? Let's see. I don't really like these ones. How to pick the right unit count. How to determine unit count. I want to make it as short as possible. Boom. Eight units on single family lot. And I like to do tests on all of these items so I can figure out when people see a certain thumbnail, do they click more on this one, more on this one, and more on this one? And right now, I believe YouTube lets you. Property. All right. So I will probably come up with one more title, but now you can see how I get this podcast ready for publication on Monday, right? That's what I do. I have my editor, PF for my team, go through all the videos. We have optimized our ChatGPT to look at the entire transcript, pull out the main points, and also come up with the right questions so that it can be written in a way that optimizes for generative engine optimization. GEO is essentially the equivalent of AI for SEO, for search engine optimization. But now it's all about show up in ChatGPT. So you might be wondering, hey, why am I covering this? I truly believe that if you're trying to show up and help as many people as possible, you have to get discovered because you have to believe that you bring the best information out there for everybody. And I'm doing this because I want my kids to know the strategy. Because if they want to get discovered, if they have a mission, whoever they want to serve and however they want to serve, they need to have this information. So that's why I do this video so that you can all learn how to start your own podcast and position yourself as the best in your niche. All right. Hope you all have an amazing day. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 758. Have a good one, everybody.